Okay, everybody. So I think there's a whole load of great people joining. I can see various coaches joining. Serak, Tega, somebody else joining there. Ak Prince. Got a few names joining here, which is really wonderful. And obviously, calling out from the Revive team over here. My name's Tom, and we're joined with our CEO Forrest, also on the call. And obviously today, really happy to welcome and invite Mr. Michael Kummer and Mr. William Broman as well. So thank you both, gentlemen, for sharing your valuable time with us today. We really appreciate it. I'm really looking forward to getting to this conversation and hearing from both of you. I think one thing just to mention on this call is that it's just a first chat to get together, an open discussion. We're talking about training, about health. Big topic for us all is in recovery. 3 out of the 4 of us are getting a little bit older, so that's a bit more important for us these days. But the future's ahead, William, so hopefully some good tips even for you here.
I'm getting there.
Yeah, that's it, my friend. And of course, we want to talk about tech. Everybody here loves tech, loves geeking out on it. So I think maybe let's just start straight in with a short introduction of Michael, if you don't mind, then we'll move to William, and then Forrest as well from yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it, the opportunity. And yeah, my name is Michael Kummer. I love fitness, I love health, I love technology. I try to merge, all of that whenever possible. I used to be a professional track and field athlete when I was maybe your age, William. I don't know how old you are, but in my early 20s, I used to sprint 100 meters and made it all the way to the Junior World Championships. And I think my best ranking was like number 5 in Europe at the U19 age category. And then I took a break, moved to the US, adopted the standard American diet, got out of shape, did all the things that you shouldn't be doing, and then rediscovered not only fitness, but also health in a more holistic area, anywhere from, nutrition, sleep, stress management, tribalism, and all the things that, make up a healthy lifestyle ultimately. And so I picked up CrossFit at some point, got actually injured at my very first workout because I still remembered, all the stuff that I could lift back in the days. And I just, assumed that I can resume where I left off a decade earlier, got injured, and but ever stuck with CrossFit. And, as you mentioned before, I'm now older, 40 years old, not 20 anymore. Body takes a little bit longer to recover, is maybe a little bit more prone to injury if you try to push the envelope. And so, happy to share what I've learned over the years and what recovery techniques I've been using, which ones have been working and what hasn't worked. And with that, William, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Nice intro, Michael. Yes, my name is Will. I'm here from Sweden, Stockholm, calling from Stockholm. So my background is in men's artistic gymnastics, and especially the still rings. So I've been a gymnast for about, 19 years. And I specialize in the still rings. Many people know them from the Olympics. It's 6 apparatus. It's the pommel horse, floor exercise, high bar, parallel bars, vault, and the still rings. And basically my history was that my parents thought that I had very poor balance as a kid. So their idea of fixing that kid was to throwing him into gymnastics. That's how the journey began. And basically the coach there was a typical sort of Russian coach in terms of him having a background in Soviet Union. He thought that I had the will, but perhaps not the talent. But the will seemed to do a lot of work over time. And I got to the level of becoming a North European champion on still rings. I led the Swedish team to the World Championships back in 2018. And basically, at many points in my career, I have tried to balance, health and performance and try to find that perfect spot of fulfillment and flow when you try to perform your best when the stakes are the highest. And basically my introduction to Revive is that I was born with the larger soft tissue parts in my knees, which causes a lot of inflammation. And this only sort of cure for that is to have sort of a big surgery, which risks destabilizing the knees. So instead of doing a big surgery that might just, cause more problems, I found about Revive and tried the product, and it's actually lowering my inflammation. Now I can run more frequently. So that's the intro. Awesome to be here.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
Thank you,
Great
Will.
introductions from both of you guys, yeah. And I'll go ahead and jump right in unless, Tom, you wanted to
No, please go for it.
Sure. So I don't have as impressive a resume from my sports background as these two guys. But I think one of the things that we had connected about was all of us had an interest in both sports and health and fitness and how sports fit into health and fitness, but also the ability to use technology and how we can use technology, where technology is typically seen as something that if you're watching too much TV or over a phone too much, it's impacting you negatively. You have too much blue light, is impacting your sleep and recovery poorly. We see the kind of opportunity there to be able to flip that on its head and use technology for better recovery and for better health and wellness, for better sleep, to improve quality of life, essentially. And that's kind of our goal at Revive, is essentially to increase quality of life in the most substantial way we can for the largest number of people we can. And I think that's kind of resonating with everybody here. And hopefully we can, in the discussion today, cover a little bit about photobiomodulation, but also just talk about a little bit of the future of what technology can do to improve our lives versus kind of be that millstone, that weight that's actually throwing us out of balance with a natural world. How do we kind of re-engage with a more natural lifestyle, but also take advantage of the benefits of that technology can help provide us? So I think we've got a great forum for this and a good group to be able to cover that. With people who performed at super high levels, and I haven't had a chance to train with William, but I can tell you personally from having trained with Michael last week. Wow, that's that's really high level performance still for like, and it's great because this is something that you didn't see, or at least most of us haven't seen coming from a couple of decades ago. Once you hit 40 or 50, you didn't see people getting after competitive athletics. You didn't have the ability to go push yourself as much. And one of the things you can do with the training modalities, but also the technology to help support recovery, is keep your career of athletics and competition longer. And personally, I've been playing rugby, in my 40s now, which I wouldn't have thought, even 10 or 15 years ago, wouldn't have really considered, just because of the high impact. And the recovery is more difficult when you get older, but there's things you can do, there's steps you can take to be able to mitigate a lot of that right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Great points there, Forrest. And look forward to peeling back the onion a little bit more with all three of you guys to see how the training and recovery works, and then also any tech that you've used and you're finding some connections with as well. So maybe that's a great starting point, Forrest, if you think so as well. Is Michael, Wes, in your training regime, in your routine that you see weekly, what does that kind of look like from a higher level? And then if you're carrying injuries, what sort of adaptations are you making in your training program? What tools are you using, or what philosophies are you using to adapt into that?
Yeah, I'm thinking a similar boat as Willie mentioned before. His trainer was like, Soviet trained. And mine used to work out when I was a track athlete. He used to work with the Russians as well. And they had a very clear mentality, you either, make it mentally or you're out, And so I learned at a relatively young age already that, just because you think you're done doesn't necessarily mean your body is physically done. And so I've gotten mentally very strong in my early 20s and just pushed through everything. I remember there were many weeks where at least 2 or 3 times a week I would vomit, after a workout. And at some point I learned that, okay, just because you're down and you vomit doesn't mean you cannot get back up and continue the workout. And so that has really shaped my my philosophy and my mentality as far as workout and recovery is concerned, in maybe not the ideal way, because I always pushed, the envelope. I always pushed past what I thought my body would be able to do, and I never quite took enough time to recover. And so it took me another 10 years or 15 years or so to figure out that it's, pushing it is important. You want to push harder than someone else if you want to, especially if you're genetically not as gifted as someone else, but you also need to take time to recover. And very often what I've noticed is whenever I got injured and I couldn't work out for 2 or 3 weeks, I would come back stronger than I were before. And I'm like, this is odd. Everyone worked out during those 2 or 3 weeks. I didn't. And now I'm better than everyone. How is that possible? And so then it kind of occurred to me that recovery is important to, build strength, to build stamina, to build speed, because, without the repair process, you're just going to go into overtraining, and at some point you pay the price, and then your body takes the break it needs. Just from to give you some context as far as my mentality over years has been concerned. And so I learned more and more to pay attention, to recovery and to make room for recovery. So now, I actually had weeks now in my CrossFit training where I would only work out 3 or 4 times instead of 5 or 6. And funny enough, compared to everyone else who, did even more training and who we worked out with, I came out stronger, I came out better, just because I took the time for those recovery modalities, which in my case include, red light therapy, sauna bathing, cold plunging, stretching and mobility work, percussion therapy, but even just, as something as simple as going for a walk after an intense workout and, getting your mind in the right mindset, recovering mentally from the stress that is the workout, but also, just get some blood flowing and without, again, stressing the body more than you need to. And as far as technology is concerned, photobiomodulation obviously is one of the great devices or the great technologies that I've been using, but also paying attention to my heart rate variability. And I use different devices for that. I use Whoop, I use Oura Ring, I use, my 8 Sleep, my cooling mattress, that all track HRV and my resting heart rate, in particular while I'm in deep sleep, because that's a great indication of how my nervous system is doing and how it's adapting to the stressors of the day and maybe even the previous day. So I can kind of see trends where my HRV is going. If it's, going nosediving and it stays low, then that's, again, a sign for me that I need to back off a little bit. Maybe it's mental stress, maybe it's physical stress. That's for me to kind of figure out what it might be, but to give my body enough break and to, get the trend back up again, which is always an indication that I'm now again in a position where I can take on more stress.
Excellent, Michael. And I think you've written some amazing blogs over the last few years, specifically on technology. And I remember reading one on the Oura Ring, the comparisons and things like that. And I think anybody that's interested in catching up with that HRV side of things, definitely that's a superb resource, and we can plug that in. Maybe talk and just pop in, if you can find that blog now, and just pop it into the links so people can follow it. But yeah, great info. Pass it over to yourself, William, if you wouldn't mind.
Absolutely. I think you brought up some great topics there, Michael, especially about strain and recovery and how to balance those two. I think I inherited my father's sort of strong forehead, as we say in Sweden. Like, I have a very strong will, and many times during my career I pushed myself over the limits, oftentimes resulting in sort of drastic injuries like stress fractures in my lower back, torn ligaments, broken bones in different directions, some more nastier than others. And essentially, balancing those two as sort of became the focus for my last years in my career, because high performance is also sort of high performance recovery, if you truly think about it. And the ways I go about that is, from several aspects, because, there's a lot of layers embedded here. There's nutrition, there's sleep, there's your stress levels, there could be sort of meditation. So it's sort of puzzling these pieces together. And of course, life comes in between, but when you're all about that high performance moment and balancing those two, I think, successfully you can make it happen. And the way I try to go about it myself is to sort of add a routine at a time, because, as a very sort of, at least very motivated person in terms of achieving high performance, I think it's very easy to sort of adopt all the technologies you possibly can at the same time and try to do everything. And if you're super sort of strong in your willpower, you might be able to do so for perhaps a month. And then something, comes up, an obstacle, an injury or something, and then you just lose all those routines. You're trying to add something successively, like once at a time. And for instance, with intermittent fasting, like do it successively, or with the, more stable sleeping routines, like do it successively. Because going hard into those things, it's usually never ends up well, either for you or the surroundings. And I think I have a couple of scars to prove that concept is pretty much right.
Oh, great. That's great, William. And what age did you start on the rings, William? What age was that actually you were in there and then you started to compete? And then what age was it where you started? Obviously, that would have been, as you mentioned, about your father got you and your parents got you into that for helping with balance. But then at what point did your mental sort of game take over where you're like, I really want to do this, and push yourself?
Yeah, so it started with actually me watching a good old American movie, of course. And I watched a pretty sort of non-familiar movie called The Peaceful Warrior. It's about an athletic student over in California, Berkeley. He's at university, he's enrolled there, and he meets with this spiritual coach, basically, who guides him about, performance and high performance living, having this guided lifestyle. And I saw that movie when I was 11. Of course, gymnastics was very competitive even at the age of 6, but I think I took like a mental choice back then that I wanted to become like, of course, as every kid wants to become like at the highest possible level in the world. And that's where basically I started, staying later at practice, coming in earlier, putting in the extra hours. And at that age, it really gave sort of exponential growth because sort of the more I added, the better the outcome. But that could only sort of last for a couple of years, given that, you become older and there's wear and tear. I think when I was 16, that's when sort of the real stress fractures kicked in. But when I got the stress fractures, it also opened up the opportunity for the still rings, which leads me to answer your question. Because I couldn't perform the other events, but I could do strength. And I found out pretty quickly that I was pretty strong. So I got back like way stronger and, came at a very sort of high level in terms of being a junior, doing some like strength elements in the rings that's pretty unique for that age. And I think the Junior European Championships back in 2014 was pretty much when I proved my name in the arena, so to say.
Fantastic. Really interesting. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for sharing the backstory on that. Forrest, are you over to you, mate? Any thoughts on that, what the gentlemen are saying?
Well, actually, I was going to just dig in with William a little bit more, because I know he's also been doing some research on kind of sympathetic and parasympathetic kind of nervous system and how that relates back to flow, because it's I think from a non-professional athlete, and I think a lot of the folks who will be following us will kind of have a similar perspective for it. What you're looking for is health and wellness, but also being able to kind of keep mentally alert. And I think there's a balance with kind of that the mental wellness and how that ties in with the sympathetic and parasympathetic. Again, I know William's been doing some research into that area, so I just be nice to kind of hear your thoughts on that and what you think about tracking it and how it impacts you from a training or workload and general flow state on a daily basis now.
Awesome question. I love it too much almost to sort of be able to answer it during a short time. But I think if I start with my best flow experience, we can sort of build from that. And my best flow experience was back during the World Championships 2018 in the still rings. We started out in the still rings. And basically what happened during those championships was that the first guy who competed had a fall. So I needed to nail my routine to be able to score a very sort of crucial point for Team Sweden. So I was last out in the first apparatus. And I had a very, very sort of efficient mental coach back then. He's a sort of former silver medalist in canoeing. His name is called Tommy Karls. And basically what he taught me about acceptance, that I could accept every outcome, regardless if it was mediocre, high performance, very bad. So whenever a thought would come up, like I'm going to fail, or I'm going to do really well, or I'm going to do something mediocre, I would just accept everything. And that routine in particular is when I sort of lost track of everything around me. Basically, the voices of my peers screaming in the background, the commentator, the crowd, everything just started to sort of slow down. So my perception of time altered, and my sort of ability to be in this moment was just, amazing. I started to observe myself from a third person perspective, and suddenly I just landed, and everything came back. But it was sort of half the routine was just completely sort of autopilot in terms of something else taking over, which was sort of the strongest flow state that I've ever done, which was amazing. And nowadays I see flow sort of as a perfect balance between, you yourself being able to sort of take on a challenge, but also having sort of a balance between parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. And I think, to be able to access flow on a daily basis, you need a lot of things, like, good health, for instance, good sleep, good recovery, a good mental state. And it really comes down to individual triggers. I think there's definitely general patterns, and there's a lot of people that know more about flow than I do, but definitely having a balance between parasympathetic and sympathetic And the reason or sort of the way I go about achieving that is through meditation for myself and basically staying on top of my recovery game nowadays. I hope that sort of answered at least some part of your question.
No, that's perfect. I think my
saw that you went offline for a couple of
I went
seconds.
offline.
Just when I told you about my routine in the distillery.
It's nothing personal.
I'm gonna have to get with you offline about that. Yeah.
Michael,
go ahead,
I can see you sort of nodding in agreements with that, and I'm sure you've got some possibly things to add, or maybe a difference of opinion, but probably very much in line with what William's thinking, I would imagine. Perhaps you want to share some of your experiences with these topics.
Yeah, I've actually, when he said, accept any outcome, and I started thinking, what's in my head typically when I am in a competition or when I'm approaching something that's, incredibly important to me, be it doesn't really have to be sports related. It could be, an important presentation or what have you. And it occurred to me that I very often think, even if this goes completely down the drain, it's going to be okay, and it kind of goes in the same direction where you accept even the, potentially worst outcome, but also, a good one. And to kind of, set the stage that, and the other thing I always think is, this is not as important as you think it might be, what if, you had let's say a life-threatening, injury or whatever. This wouldn't, matter at all. That competition wouldn't matter at all, because there's always things that are more important. And by kind of, setting the perspective, it doesn't really lead me to performing in a way that is less than what my capacity is. It actually, I still push it as far as I can, but I remove that mental block that I have to perform at a certain level. I'll do that by default, just because, when I hear the timer go off, a 3, 2, 1 go or what have you, I go all in. But just removing that mental barrier, I think, frees up not only mental bandwidth, but it also, prevents me from going down, the rabbit hole that might be then difficult to recover from, mentally speaking. The other thing I've noticed more from a, nutritional perspective and how it impacts how my brain works and how well I feel, how, much of a flow I'm in or not, is ketones. I'm not sure if you guys have ever experimented with ketosis by, removing carbs, most carbs, and, just consuming fat as the primary source of fuel. I notice that when I'm in ketosis, my brain works significantly differently and better in the most part. I can focus better. I'm in a flow, or it's easier for me to get into the flow. Whereas when my brain is kind of trying to, get energy sources that might not be available in the form of glucose predominantly, then it's much, much more difficult for me to get into the flow and to perform mentally, which is obviously then also important to perform physically in case of a competition or an intense workout.
Really, really awesome. Really awesome. William, have you, how much do you dial in your diet in relation to what Michael has been saying?
Yeah, it sort of differs, but I think, it's sort of close to what Michael mentioned. I think when it comes to sort of my daily work, which is more of, an academic character, I think, being in that ketosis state, or for instance, doing intermittent fasting, definitely clears your mind and makes you more able to sort of have a higher focus, which is sort of one of the foundational blocks for flow. So I think that's definitely crucial. When I do go about competition, I do want to fuel myself with, particular things. For instance, when I did, in distilleries, I want to have some, of course, sugars just before the routine and have a high adrenaline state, sort of build up to that. But I think,
nice.
There's different modes for different settings in that sense. And I think Michael touched on sort of both those two, one being, from a more mental perspective, one being from a physical, and sort of both physical and mental when you sort of compete with your body.
Yeah. And when Michael was speaking, it reminded me of the expression where, a healthy man has 1,000 problems and a sick man has just one. And, it's important to accept, be really the attitude of gratitude and be grateful for these things we have. And we've all had times when you get the common cold. Maybe some people, maybe you guys, maybe some people watching have had COVID or whatever. And when you are sick, it's really tough and you just want to get better. So, having that mental mindset of whatever I'm about to go through is impermanent, and we will keep moving through this. Right. So, yeah, absolutely.
100%.
Yeah, absolutely. And Michael, you mentioned about HRV, and there's a lot of great promotions coming on about HRV. A little bit like light therapy. In the last few years, light therapy, HRV is getting a lot more press. Could you just tell us again, high level, maybe a little bit about HRV? What do you use for tracking yours, and how does that positively impact your training routine and recoveries as well?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, HRV or heart rate variability is the difference in timing between heartbeats. When people say, well, my resting heart rate is 60 beats per minute, it's not really beating, once every second. There is a variation in milliseconds between those heartbeats. And that's an indirect indication of how your nervous system is doing. So, there are two branches of your autonomous nervous system, the sympathetic and parasympathetic, as Will mentioned before. And one is more responsible for whenever you're in a fight or flight situation, when your adrenaline goes up, when you cross the street and you almost, don't see that car and it almost, hits you. That's when your sympathetic branch of the nervous system takes over to prepare you to either, run or to fight, from an evolutionary perspective. Whereas the parasympathetic one is more the resting and digesting part. And so, those two branches are in constant competition. So they basically pull on the opposite side of a rope. And you can tell by the variability between your heartbeats what branch is more dominant, which one is in overdrive. So typically the greater your heart rate variability as compared to your baseline, the more in parasympathetic mode you are. Whereas if your heart rate variability is very low, then it's an indication that you're in sympathetic mode, in fight or flight response. And both modes are obviously important, otherwise we wouldn't have them. But if you're constantly in sympathetic mode, constantly in overdrive, that's usually an indication that your body doesn't have the resources to fully recover. It might be because, of mental stressors, might be because of physical stressors. If you're in overtraining, your HRV is likely down, again, as compared to your baseline. And so you want to keep tabs on those trends to see, where it's going and to give you an idea of how your nervous system is doing. I mean, very often you can tell if you're in sympathetic mode, if you're somewhat in tune with your body, but very often, you wake up in the morning and you're not quite sure, where am I, how recovered I am. And so by measuring HRV during deep sleep, when there is no external influence, and that's typically, deep sleep is one of those phases where, your brain doesn't register what's going on around you. By measuring your HRV during deep sleep, you can get a good indication of what your nervous system is doing. And if it's in sympathetic mode during deep sleep, then that's an indication that your body is working hard to recover from stressors, be it physical or mental stressors. And that might be an indication, if that goes on over a couple of days, that might be a good cue for you to maybe lay off a little bit. And, the funny thing is, people think about stressors as, chronic stress, worrying about financials or parenting or what have you, but even working out, fasting, sauna bathing, all those are stressors, usually associated with good stress. But if your glass is already full, in terms of your stress bucket is already full, then piling those positive stressors on top is going to cause you to overflow. So you really need to think about not only reducing the bad stress, quote unquote, but also maybe laying off on all of the other things that you're doing that are otherwise maybe good for your recovery, jumping into the sauna and sweating and getting your heart rate up, or jumping into a cold plunge, not eating, fasting, skipping meals and stuff. But if you really run down, then maybe that's not, those are not the best things that you want to pile on. If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Really, really good takeaways there, Michael. And just as a note for everybody, gentlemen, we've got another 5 or 10 minutes on this call, and there's a load of people keep joining in. And I know Bex is on the call. Marco's also watching. If anybody watching has any questions, please fire them in for both William and Michael. And we'll come round to the end and ask where we can follow both of you gentlemen on social media. There's a question's just come in. Michael is have you tracked your HRV whilst you've been using the Revive device?
I have not.
Right.
I have not.
Okay.
And because the thing is, when you're awake, if you hear like a kid yelling in the background, a dog barking, whatever, that immediately changes your HRV, or it has the potential of doing so. So it's very difficult to get meaningful HRV data if you're not in deep sleep. I know that there are devices that track it like all the time. And it might be good to get a trend, line, through the course of the day to see maybe, okay, mornings, my HRV is typically lower, in the afternoon it's higher. Maybe you can correlate it with certain lifestyle, choices and activities. But generally speaking, while I'm talking to you guys right now, my HRV is probably all over the place. So getting good data while you're awake and doing things might not be as meaningful as, your HRV data during sleep.
Great. Fantastic. Forrest, I think you might want to jump in with something on that.
Yeah, I was going to say one of the things that actually has been shown from clinical trials with photobiomodulation with the light therapy is that there's the benefits to recovery are massive and substantial in a number of different ways. And one of these that they've been able to measure repeatedly is the creatine kinase. So creatine kinase is a marker that's used to track muscle inflammation. And when you increase, so to Michael's point earlier about if you're going in and doing your daily training, and especially if you're doing high intensity training, you'll see these levels, these creatine kinase levels, these kind of muscle inflammation levels spike from that training, particularly the high intensity part. It takes your body a natural certain amount of time to with the recovery program that you'll be going through to get those levels back to standard. If you're doing photobiomodulation directly after, within 15 minutes after your training, those drop down to normal in about 1/3 of the time. So your recovery from a muscle inflammation standpoint and being able to come back in from the physical, and again, there are mental stressors. There's a number of different stressors that are going to impact your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. But from a physical standpoint, from those physical stressors, you can actually reduce those impacts. So making that photobiomodulation part of a recovery program where you're doing mental and meditation on one side and being able to it just gives you a better tool in your toolkit to be able to treat those physical stressors as well.
Great. That's awesome. Great inputs there.
So what I suppose then, if you use photobiomodulation after intense workouts, you should see a change in your HRV in the following night. So if you keep correlating, red light or photobiomodulation use with your trends in HRV, on days where you use the device or we use the technology, you should see a positive impact over time. So it might be worthwhile, tracking that for a month and then seeing, how it correlates.
I was thinking the same thing. I've got my Whoop on order. I've been using the polar heart rate straps for tracking my HRV now, but what I like to have is a longer term one where I don't have to wear a heart rate monitor for sleeping. The wrist-based ones are hopefully going to be good enough from an HRV tracking standpoint to be able to give that data from the sleep, where it gives you a baseline where there's less outside variables impacting that. So it's an excellent idea. I think I'm going to go ahead and put that into my biohacking test protocols over the next few months.
Fantastic, thank you. And guys, I think I wouldn't mind if we could jump into asking about your experiences, of course, with the Move Plus as well, from a light therapy point of view, and jump into that just before the end of the call as well. William, perhaps start with yourself. You mentioned as well about the inflammation challenges that you have, and so that's how you got connected with us. So maybe you could just talk to us a little bit about your personal situation, if you like, and how you've seen any benefits so far with the Revive Move Plus.
Yeah, definitely. So I think I was sort of 19 or 20 when I first figured out that I was born with larger soft tissue parts in my knees compared to the average person. And the doctor basically said, this will lead to a lot of inflammation, a lot of pain when you, for instance, run or when you perform some gymnastics and when you, for instance, compete. But the alternative is to do surgery, but that's very risky. It risks destabilizing the whole knees. And basically it can get just worse and worse by doing surgery. So either you stick with the pain or you take this very large risk. And I chose to stick with the pain and endured. But every time I had a 5-kilometer run, I would come home and have a lot of pain basically. And I used to, put on the ice bags, but I would be in pain for 2 days, and then it would ease off. And that's why I reached out to Revive. I hope I pronounced that rightly, for the first time. That's why I reached out to you guys, and I saw your technology, and I wanted to give it a shot after I found out about you guys on the Kickstarter campaign that you had. And for me, the direct effects has been, pretty remarkable in the sense that I don't have to have that long sort of lagging effect of pain after every time I run. I do it a bit before, but mostly sort of after I run, because that's when the inflammation kicks in. And now I can, I do longer stretches of running, up to like 10 kilometers. I know I'm not a marathon runner. I'm definitely not built as one. But it certainly helps in terms of, decreasing the pain while I'm running, but also, after, which is sort of awesome for me, because then I can sleep better, then I can, walk around and be a normal person without, limping and stuff like that. So that's been my experience thus far. And please, double tap on any of those aspects.
Thank you. Yeah, and we look forward to doing more with you on that and testing new products. There's a lot of exciting things coming ahead with us, and look forward to getting you as a bit of a human guinea pig, if that's okay, on those things.
100%.
Michael, for yourself?
So, I've been using a lot of different recovery modalities and tools and gadgets, but one thing that I've always been struggling with, considering that I'm not a professional athlete, so when I feel like a little pain here and there, since, if I can't work out the next day, it doesn't impact my income, because I'm just working out because I want to, not because I have to. And so certain recovery modalities that require a lot of work on my end, be it, percussion therapy or, rubbing a red light, therapy device, or something where I have to do things, where I have to take time out of my day to use the device, has a low priority, because there are 1,000 other shiny things that I would run after, instead of just sitting down for 20 minutes or for 30 minutes and doing my recovery. That's one of the reasons why I don't stretch as much as I should. But specifically with Move Plus, it's a passive device as far as I'm concerned, because I can, add it to my shoulder, I can, wrap it around, I can wrap it around my knee, and I can use it. It does its thing while I'm watching TV or having dinner or working, so in other words, I don't need to take time out of my day to use the device. And by being able, or by having that opportunity, I use it much more often, and I use it every day, when I'm injured. And so, most everything, unless you do it, for a certain period of time and you do it consistently, you're not going to get the benefits. And so doing, percussion therapy once, getting a massage once is likely not going to change anything if you have a serious injury or, really, sore muscles or inflamed muscles. So using things over a period of time, maybe a few days, maybe a few weeks, depending on what you have, is important. And with Move Plus, I can do that without having to do anything extra. And that's really one of the, besides the technology and the fact that it works, that's really the number one selling point for me, because I put it on and I go about my day.
Awesome. Thank you. Really
totally
appreciate
agree on that one.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, William. So, Forrest, is there any sort of final words that you'd like to say for?
No, I really enjoyed the conversation today. I love, I think we all like health, wellness, training, fitness, and technology, and hopefully we can do more of these sometime soon. Really enjoyed the feedback and input from you guys, and I'd love to kind of continue this on, peeling back the layers of the onion to see what it is we can do with different technology modalities and our training and our fitness to kind of get to that flow state and make sure that people have an access to the tools they need to be able to do that in a meaningful way themselves. Because again, that's what the whole mission is to improve that quality of life for people however we can. So really appreciate you guys' time today, and if you're up for it, we'd love to do it again sometime soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. 100%.
Perhaps, gentlemen, just as we've closed, Michael, where can people follow you? And we'll add that into any notes that we do with this video.
michaelkummer.com is my main outlet, my blog, where I write about all the stuff that I test, all the gadgets that I test, and here on Instagram it's mkummer82.
Fantastic. Thank you. And William?
Yes, so they can go to williambroman.se, or they can just go to my Instagram. That's probably the best one, at William Broman.
Fantastic.
By the way, guys, I think we should add sort of a live HRV tracking for the next live Instagram, so we can see exactly the responses. That would be cool.
And start throwing out some difficult high pressure questions.
Exactly. See one who can keep the lowest HRV during the whole game.
That's awesome. Yes.
That's a great suggestion. Definitely up for that. Okay, gentlemen. Well, thank you all very much. Appreciate your time, and have a wonderful rest of the week.
Great seeing you guys.
You too.
You too.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Cheers, guys. Take care.
All the best. Bye for now.